The Todd Shapiro Show.
Time to hit the button!
On Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.
Okay, really interesting company and one that I'm fascinated by. Security is something that I find extremely intriguing, and I'm a bit of a paranoid guy, so I'm always kind of looking over my shoulder and always thinking about how people are keeping this world secure, because there's a lot of people in this world that aren't good. They're just really, a lot of people aren't on the up and up, and it seems like we're in a land of chocolate and roses at times, but really not, and people keeping it safe for you are companies such as this, 3Sixty Secure Corp, and the president joins us now, David Hyde. Hi, David. How are you?
Fantastic, thank you. How are you?
I'm wonderful, man. David, we met the CEO last week, Thomas Gerstenecker, and the way I'd just like to get to know people is really finding out quickly the background and what your background is, David, and then how you became the president of 3Sixty Secure.
Well, I emigrated from the UK, hence the Queen's English accent you can hear on the radio here. Yeah. Back in '89, I was a young man then, and I came here with a suitcase and lots of ambition. So I got into the security industry, worked my way up. I actually went through 4 or 5 provinces, spent about 20 years working security, and then started a consulting company. And that's when, at about 2013, I started to work on cannabis security files for the new regulated cannabis industry, which Canada, of course, has been a leader in. So I did about 5-6 years in there and got quite a name for myself, kind of being the cannabis security consulting specialist. And then Thomas and I connected up before January. We amalgamated our companies under the branch of 3Sixty Secure.
The protection of cannabis is fascinating, especially in an industry that is still emerging and we're still learning so much about, David. What would have made you thought to go in that direction? And then what kind of consulting and security detail would you provide for them that sort of made you the man, that people needed to learn from?
Yeah, well, back in 2013, I was actually doing a CBC News interview one evening about a national security story, and the CEO of one of the very first cannabis companies was watching, and he called me after and said, I kind of watched you there on the news. You seem to be fairly knowledgeable on security. I'm looking for a security person. We have this new cannabis facility being put up. Have you heard about the new regulated framework that Canada is enacting later on this year? And I said, I haven't. And so I looked at it then, I reviewed it, and I thought, this is an emerging industry that Canada can lead in. We're very kind of at the beginning, kind of first country in, so to speak, a large country. And I could really corner the market on security. The security requirements are very high level. So I studied the subject. I went to Colorado, to California. I went to Tasmania, over to the poppy kind of fields and poppy grow security. I really boned up on the whole subject and decided that this was kind of my go all in moment, my Vegas moment, if you will. So I put it all on the line, and I figured that if I could become the go-to person on security consultation for cannabis, I could work with governments and companies around the globe, and that's really what ended up happening. I'd like to say it was all smart brain power and good hard work, and it was part of that, but it was also good luck. It was the timing was right. And, the beauty of what Thomas Gerstenecker and I do together is that I bring the consultation, the advisory, my team has master's degrees in security. We teach the subject at university, so we get a very good depth of understanding in security theory, strategy, and consulting. And Thomas's team, before we came on board, had all the boots on the ground. So we're talking about the security guards, the secure transport, the best-in-class offering in security services. So we brought the two together, and we really have what you might call seed-to-sale coverage of security and risk management in Canada, and now we're moving into other markets as well.
David Hyde is on the phone with us, president of 3Sixty Secure Corp. Since 2013, David, until now, have you found, and maybe are you still finding, a lot of these cannabis types of companies maybe never even really factored into the budgets the amount of security that they would need?
I think at the beginning people did not, and the bar on security started very high. For example, your listeners may not know that for the first 3 years, all of these facilities had to have a bank vault, essentially, like a very, very high level bank vault type secure storage area to store the cannabis. Even the waste cannabis had to be stored to a very high degree. What we've seen over the last couple of years now is a slight relaxation. You might call it a normalization of the security paradigm around the cannabis facilities. So, back in 2013-14, it was a very high budget. It's a little bit relaxed now, and I think it's, overall, it probably ends up being between 5 and 7% of the overall spend on a cannabis facility is the security. So it's a fair ticket item for sure.
What about like mom and pop shops, David, where they're starting to get into products, whether it be CBD or THC infused? And is that something that people need to really guard very closely and protect as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, we're dealing with a raw product or a material that does have value on the black market, and it certainly could attract attention from criminals. So, we don't need to overreact, and it's not as though we've got gold bullion that we're dealing with. It is a plant, and of course, it does have all these medicinal and good properties to it. But when it's in certain forms, particularly when it's converted into oil or when you've got the dried flower at the end in bulk, there is a high black market value, street value to this cannabis. So, yeah, we do need to protect it. Whatever size of operation that you're running. But I think we have seen more of a risk-based approach more recently where, in the early stages of growth and the nursery grows and things, they don't need as much security. But as we get more nearer the end product, the raw material that has so much value, there is more security around that for sure.
And I guess one of the things we're starting to really see is much more transportation of plants, of products, not only across this country, but overseas and over different countries. Now, have you been involved in big transports of the cannabis plant?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that 3Sixty really cuts its teeth on and really was the pioneer is secure cannabis transportation throughout Canada. So, we were the original, the first in place. And not only do we have the vehicles, we have armored vehicles and unarmored vehicles and armed security with firearms and unarmed security. But, we also have vehicles that are temperature controlled, for example, so that when the transport takes place, we know that the quality paradigm can be maintained. We have, ways that we transport actual plants and clones and mother plants that need thermal blanket type protection. We have ambient temperature, moisture control. We clean the vehicles out after every load. We track them with geo-tracking to make sure that the customer always knows where that shipment is. There's a legal onus, actually, on the clients, on the licensed producers, to actually track all the cannabis that goes into and emanates from their facility. So if we made a mistake and we're not able to account for that cannabis during its life cycle at all, that would be a problem for the license holder and would technically be a breach of the regulation. So the need to transport and transport properly is very high. And I'd like to think that we're very, very good at it with the number of transports that we've done over the course of the last 6 years.
David Hyde is with us, 3Sixty Secure Corp, an amazing company, 360secure.com, and learning all about it. What might be I don't know how you phrase it, a contract you got in your industry that might surprise people, something you would have guarded and protected through transport or that people wouldn't even assume would be?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've been fortunate to be able to secure some contracts with some of the major licensed producers to take transport their materials within Canada and abroad. And one of the things that your listeners might not know, given the sheer size of Canada, a number of our runs, the long-distance runs, go via air freight. And 3Sixty Secure is the most prolific mover of cannabis via air freight in Canada. So by far, we move the most amount of cannabis. Obviously, a shipment from BC to Ontario that would take many days by road, there are reasons why it needs to get there quicker. We need to control the environment where that cannabis is located in. So we do quite a lot of air freight in addition to the ground movements. And if we're operating large volumes of cannabis, there's, again, very specific security protocols around. There can be, we have cannabis-specific insurance coverage that needs to be on the vehicles, and the drivers are trained to a high degree to actually handle this. So it's very different than your cash in transit and other types of movement of valuable products. Cannabis transport is unique, and we like to think that side of our company does it the best.
And David, outside of cannabis, what would other types of things be that you would secure, and an eclectic one at that?
Well, we do work in a number of different areas in terms of not only moving the cannabis itself, but actually one arm of our company, of course, that we do. We also do cash in transit and move other valuable commodities around. Obviously the vehicles that we have for cannabis, we tend to leave them with cannabis, but we do move other valuable goods around, whether it be jewelry, whether it would be precious metals, etc. There's a wide range of different things that we move around. It wouldn't behoove me to get into too many details, obviously, kind of being a security company. Your listeners might think, why the loose lips? But, we've had some pretty unusual movements of things around, both in Canada and abroad. We also, of course, are involved in exporting, cannabis movement out of Canada. Canada, of course, is the biggest producer of cannabis that has a federally legalized system. So there's a lot of export taking place as well that we get involved in.
How closely is the company and you and Thomas paying attention to sort of the legalization process going on in America and your involvement on that side of the border?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're watching it very, very carefully. The security requirements around cannabis facilities in the U.S. is very unique. It's all a cash business, of course, given the banking restrictions. So a big part of our focus in the U.S. at the retail dispensaries particularly is securing the cash and having extra security around cash storage. In addition, the sheer volume and magnitude in states like California, the market in California, is as big as the Canadian market. So there's a lot of scale. There's a lot of risk that gathers across the U.S. Right now, 3Sixty certainly has announced that we are expanding into the U.S. and we have various movements in place that will allow us to execute on that in line with our strategy. So we are going to be able to announce at the appropriate time some movements there. And ultimately, our goal would be down the track when there is federal legalization in the United States. We'd like to replicate really what we were able to do here in Canada, which was become the kind of go-to group for both consulting and kind of, you might say, the picks and shovels aspect of the security with the transporting and the guarding operations.
And has anyone ever sort of frowned upon you, even personally, David Hyde, to going, oh, how dare you being involved in a space that we still don't concur with or agree with? And, there are still stigmas beyond cannabis. Has that ever been hurt you to expand in other areas?
It's a really fair comment, and I'm going to say no. I mean, I think really so much of it is education. And I think your listeners will kind of resonate with this as well. When you think about marijuana and cannabis, ganja and weed and the kind of various words you can use, there certainly has been and can be a negative connotation to it when it's used in the wrong way or when it supports illicit activity and crime and that. But the reality is that I've learned over the course of a short period of time, this plant is quite the amazing medicine for people. And it's very much proven now in many clinical studies to really help people to live more normal lives that have a variety of things, children with seizures, people with fibromyalgia, people with anxiety, and a wide range of different colitis, for example, lupus, and many different ailments. A regimen of cannabis in the right type of mix can significantly impact these people's quality of life. And I've had family members that have benefited from that. So I've been close to what cannabis can do for people when it's used medicinally, and I'm a big advocate and supporter of that. And I think most people, once they get even a mild education in the subject, they come around pretty quickly and they kind of jump on that normalization bandwagon, which really is where globally we're seeing it move right now. Cannabis is becoming much more accepted globally.
Without a doubt, and it's one of the things we've tried to do here on the show for many years now is educate and just be a source of knowledge for people within the cannabis industry. And what I find interesting is sort of the dichotomy where you think of cannabis as maybe more of a kind of peaceful, loving, availability now for people legally in Canada. And then there are still those that are opposed to guns and things like that. You're a business that combines both of them. I think that politically, there might be differences with the way people view things, and yet you're here with this great company, making sure that you're doing both, very well, protecting the plant, but also doing something that is, obviously clearly very legal. Is there politics? Does that ever get involved in your industry?
We haven't really found that to date. I mean, we are certainly having discussions globally in terms of other countries where, our expertise has been recognized in Canada. We work not only with all the licensed producers, but we've been exposed to the regulator here, Health Canada, to a large degree. So we've been able to watch them regulate this industry, and they've done some things really well, and some things probably needed to be perfected as they've improved the regulations. So we're in demand in foreign markets, in by other governments and things where we can help them to get their heads around what this means. And some of those countries are very conservative, or some of them are much more liberal. So certainly the political aspects to us probably affect us more in our global reach as we move out of North America and have to navigate these different cultures and contexts and countries and religions, et cetera, et cetera. But here in Canada, we've really found success in doing this responsibly. We don't have armed security with every run. We don't have the full armored vehicles. We're very discreet. Our vehicles are unmarked for the cannabis movement. We've really been very cautious and careful in how we run our business, and we've taken the responsible path, and I think it's paid off to this point.
It's really interesting. My mind just sort of took it to another place, and I'm glad you helped clarify for that. You being originally, I would imagine, from whereabouts from England are you from?
I'm from Nottingham, right in the middle, Robin Hood country.
Right in Rob. Okay, interesting. Have you been following what's going on with the legalization process over there?
Yeah, it's very interesting because you look at the big 5 EU countries, and with which the UK is one of them, and you would think that they might be the slowest to kind of take up the cannabis, but in terms of a medical and a possible legalization. But when you poll the public in the UK, there is a percentage, a higher percentage that supports the legalization of cannabis, and it's seen in a responsible, regulated framework as really the best way to reduce black market usage, to reduce the exposure of children to cannabis in inappropriate type uses, and rather than the law enforcement, spending a whole lot of money on enforcing rules against this, this plant or this drug. You can redirect a lot of that when you have a regulated regime, and it tends to bring taxation into the coffers as well. So many reasons why I think the UK public are very supportive, and I think we're going to be surprised at how quickly in the next few months we see activity in the UK with respect to legalization.
360secure.com to learn more about the company. We're on the phone with David Hyde, the president of 360 Secure. Is it easier to do business in Britain because of the accent? Like, if you got to bring over the company there when they start to lax some laws, is that an easier thing to do?
Well, it certainly helps with the schmoozing in the pubs and clubs at night, I'd say. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to what you've done in this industry. Sure. There are Canadian people over there now that are working in various facets, trying to get traction for kind of responsible regulation of cannabis, not only in the UK, but also in other parts of Europe. I was in London, UK, just a couple of weeks ago at a conference called Cannabis Europa, and I was talking to people from many different countries. And really, there's a lot of people looking at Canada in terms of what we can export for the knowledge that we've gained from being really the first G7 country to legalize and to regulate cannabis in this way. And I think there's actually a lot of good business to be had by us exporting what we've learned, both good and bad, that we can help with other countries as well. So we've been very fortunate to have landed some good opportunities out there globally.
Well, thank you, David, for joining us. And I will say, personally, I don't give financial advice to anyone. I'm not qualified to do so. But personally, I think the where your stock's at, it's a good opportunity for people as well. SAFE being the symbol on the CSE, and we really appreciate all the knowledge and all the information you provide us. And we hope to have you back on the program. And I would love to grab a fresh pint of Guinness with you one day in any country we'd be in.
That sounds great. All the best to you and your listeners. It's been a great chat. Thank you.
Okay, David, cheers. Have a good evening. Thank you to David Hyde from 3Sixty Secure.
This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.